What if I told you that I'm about to give you 5 secrets that could help you live a long, healthy, and happy life? And what if they had little to do with diet and exercise? Most people want a long, healthy, and rewarding life. I know I do, and you probably do as well. So while you grab a pen and paper to write these 5 secrets down, let me tell you how I came to learn them. Most people don't age gracefully or in life well. But this guy, our friend Carl, did. I'm Robert, and Carl is standing between me and my beautiful bride, Judy. Carl lived to be the age of 102. He was a dear friend of my wife and me for 34 years until his death. We thought of him as family. I think our kids grew up thinking he was an uncle. I investigated Carl's life to find out how he lived so long and well. If you haven't grabbed pen and paper to write these 5 things down, do it now. Carl was healthy and strong until the last moments of his life. His living room was never crowded with walkers and wheelchairs, and he never even needed eyeglasses, unlike me. Everyone who knew him fell in love with him. At age 102, he died with lots of friends, and the auditorium was full for his memorial. So Carl lived a long time and had a life that blessed others. I want that too. Talk to a rich person instead of your unemployed brother-in-law if you want to get rich. In the same way, if you want to know how to live a long, full life and be a blessing to others until your final breath, find someone who did it and look at their life. That's how you learn. I asked Carl's daughters what his secret to a long life was. They gave me the secrets of his long life, and I'm going to share them with you here. Carl himself, though, told me a 6th secret that might be the most important one of all. So I'll call that a bonus secret and save it for those who listen to the end. Why? Because what we hear last tends to be what we remember the most. And that bonus secret is changing the way that I live life. It has changed my focus. Now, before you write down these 5 secrets and the bonus secrets so you can keep them somewhere to see them daily, think for a minute about how our standard idea of people in their 80s and 90s is in America. Many retire to find themselves in poor health, spending most of the day in a recliner, watching TV, and starting a steady decline in their isolation. Their living room becomes cluttered with walkers and wheelchairs, and they only talk about the number of doctor's appointments they have each week. I've seen it repeatedly as a family counselor for over 44 years. My wife picks up an invalid each week to take to church, and the invalid's younger than she is. Would you like to know how to live out the rest of your life as a blessing to others with a multitude of friends until the moment you leave this life? I did. So I did some research on Carl, and I found a big surprise. If you think this will be dietary tips, it isn't. Carl and his wife Margie ate a lot of fresh vegetables and fresh fruit from their garden. But they also ate wide desserts and other things that aren't health promoting, quite frankly. The surprise is that I'm not about to give you a bunch of dietary tips for physical health and longevity. And there weren't any supplement bottles in their house. So I learned that a long and happy life often comes more from the attitudes and behaviors than a supplement bottle or an exercise routine. I hope you got that pen and paper ready to record Carl's 5 secrets taught to me by his daughters. But some of you think I'm a nosy person who interviews his family and investigates his life to discover why one guy lives so long. There's 2 reasons I did this. I would love to live a long, useful life, and I'd love to live long enough that my wife and I might one day celebrate our 70th wedding anniversary. We've had 44 so far. And I expected Carl to die 18 years sooner than he did. Can you guess why I say 18 years? Let me tell you and see if you can guess. There's a few facts about Carl that you should know, and I'll keep it short. He, as a young man, joined the U.S. Navy as a machinist mate for World War II, and he repaired battleships to return them to the war effort. He came back home to his wife and his best friend, Margie. He ran into burning buildings and saved people as a Houston, Texas fireman. He retired from the fire department to move to East Texas, where he and Margie regularly had a 4-acre garden out some distance from the house and another 1-acre garden next to the house. They produced enough food that they constantly gave food to their friends. Carl was a deacon in his local church and served on the community water board. He also started a volunteer fire department and now has a fire truck that bears his name. So why did I think Carl would die 18 years sooner than he did? After 15 years of our friendship, his best friend and soulmate, Miss Margie as I called her, died. They had been married for over 60 years. Margie died 19 years before Carl. Now you may have no doubt guessed why I thought he would die 18 years before he did. When a man 60 or over loses a spouse, they are 70% more likely to die within a year of losing their spouse compared to a man who didn't lose a spouse. I've often seen one spouse die within a year of their partner when they had a happy and committed marriage. Sure enough, Carl entered about a 2-year depression after Margie died. But do you remember that I said he had 5 secrets to a long life? Well, these secrets were so ingrained in his life that he did them even through his time of depression. So let's dive into the Carl's 5 secrets, which we should all use for a long, useful life. But make sure you stay tuned to the end for the bonus secret, which Carl told me personally when he was 97, standing in front of me, dripping with sweat. I'll tell you why he was dripping with sweat and what he said to me that changed my life. It is the biggest reason I think that Carl survived and outlived his wife by 19 years. And it's the secret that's continuing to change my life one day at a time. To clarify, these 5 secrets aren't just about living a long life. They're about living a life that is worth living. Let me say that again, in case you missed it. These 5 secrets aren't just about living a long life, but about living a life worth living. Okay, pens and papers now. Secret number 1 is a strong work ethic. I bet you've never known anyone who started a new career at age 92. Carl did. For years, Carl would watch state auctions and get someone to drive with him to someplace in Texas where he would buy a van, truck, or bulldozer that the state used to use but was willing to auction off. And then he would use it around his farm in the community. At age 92, he called his son-in-law and said, "Jack, can you drive me to Mississippi and help me bring back a sawmill?" Jack knew not to argue with his father-in-law, so he left East Texas while it was still dark. They returned in the middle of the night with a sawmill on their trailer. Carl began going around his community to find every fallen tree he could. He ran it through the sawmill to make lumber. Then he'd offer to chop down trees that looked mostly dead or might be about ready to fall on a house. Carl made picnic tables and porch swings, and he gave most of those things away. But he saved some planks because one of his daughters was going to a church that was building a new sanctuary. After Carl's death, I arrived at the church with these beautiful natural wood planks covering the front of the auditorium and found out that Carl cut all the planks and then supervised their installation at age 94. Carl was a hard worker all of his life, but never spent a moment in a gym, never lifted weights, never jogged down the country road. You know, hard work is often the best exercise there is, and Carl always found something useful to do. I'm reminded of a deacon in a church I pastored named Cy Garrett, and he was a vibrant 82-year-old man. He mowed my lawn once for 2 weeks after I was recovering from hernia surgery. He told me once that I should always remind what he called old people that there was never a time to retire from God's work. Carl would agree. Work is not only a good exercise, but it also gives you a sense of purpose, particularly if it's serving your church, your family, your friends, or your community. Now let's look at secret number 2. Secret 2 is stay involved in the community. Carl made the world a better place wherever he went. When he retired to East Texas, he realized the nearest fire station was at least 20 minutes away. So he started a volunteer fire department that could respond in 2 minutes. He often would get the fire truck, bring it to the church, and teach people how to handle the fire hose properly and how you needed to set the nozzle if you needed to walk behind a wall of water to walk inside of a burning building. He showed me how to do that. At his church, where he was a faithful deacon and helped build the building and a new fellowship hall, Carl and Margie always were hospitable to people in the church, especially to their pastor, and many times my wife and I ate dinner with them. One of my favorite meals was when my wife made potato pancakes and Margie made tomato gravy. They had never heard of potato pancakes. We'd never heard of tomato gravy, but it was such a good match that we remembered it for years afterwards. I'm not sure if I can count the number of times Carl received a telephone call from a plumber or someone on the community water board while we were visiting with him. Carl was the only one who had seen the water lines buried in the community and the only one who could tell people where to find them. On one visit, I learned that the community had been without water for 5 days because the water in the tower wasn't coming out anymore. The people replaced the line coming from the tower, but still no one had water. So they finally called Carl. He was 100 years old at the time. He went up there and explained to them that there was an air blockage and showed them how to clear that out so that the water could flow. Suddenly everybody had water again because the 100-year-old guy knew what he was doing. He received so many phone calls that at age 101, he finally rejoined the community water board for this rural community so he could answer all the questions at a monthly meeting instead of the odd-hour calls. He served on the water board for a total of over 40 years and got a neat little trophy on his mantle to show for that. Now to secret 3, value family relationships. Carl's family was central to his life. He insisted on family gatherings for every holiday, usually at his house. For many years, a tire swing was hanging from a large oak tree behind his house. Many of my kids grew up playing on that tire swing. Carl's family was not limited to his blood kin. For some reason, he and Margie decided early on in our relationship to call Judy and me their kids. We were always treated as family. Every time we came to show them a new baby, that kid was also adopted into the family. Whenever I returned to East Texas, I always made it a point to call Carl, but I didn't always call him first. I just showed up, and he was always delighted. And he especially knew how to charm my wife. About 2 weeks before he died, my wife and I went to see him in a rehab center. He enthusiastically hugged me and shook my hand, but then he looked at Judy and told her, "I've been waiting all day to see your face." If you knew Carl, you knew that he loved you. And because he loved you, he looked for opportunities to give to you something. I seldom left his home without frozen cream peas, Crowder peas, or purple whole peas, and usually a basket of tomatoes. At age 100, he asked his daughter to help him can some salsa using all the tomatoes and peppers from his garden. At that age, he had scaled down from a 4-acre garden to a 2-acre garden, which was my first clue that Carl was slowing down. His daughter asked him, "Why do you want to can salsa?" And he said that he wanted to give it to his neighbors. And by neighbors, he meant pretty much the whole community. He carried some cans of salsa everywhere and left them with friends and church members. Now on to secret number 4. Secret number 4 is to have a sense of humor and joy. Now, even in his last years, Carl was joyful. His sense of humor never left him. His comment to my wife about seeing her face was that joyful humor that accompanied Carl's heart for people. But he always found a way to crack a joke or make a witty observation. He loved attending church, even though it became more difficult for him when he hit 100 years of age. My kids often sat with Carl during church, and he loved that. Nothing made him happier than having young people around him, and he would listen to them intently as though what they had to say was the most important news of his day. In the last week of his life, one of Carl's neighbors, Candy, came to the rehab center where Carl was and sang hymns to him. He couldn't sing them, but you can still see him mouthing the words. He loved those songs. For Carl, joy wasn't a superficial feeling, but it was rooted in his faith and his love for others. Secret 5, never hold a grudge and always ask forgiveness. I've known many bitter old people who held on to a basket full of grudges. They were so bitter by these stored up hurts that they seemed to pour venom on everybody with whom they spoke. Someone once said, bitterness is an acid that does more damage to the vessel in which it is stored than to the victim upon whom it is poured. Now, we all say things we don't mean occasionally. One day, Carl said something to someone, and it upset his daughter, who felt embarrassed. She told her dad that those words had hurt her. Now, Carl never wanted to hurt anybody in his whole life. So the next day, he shows up on her doorstep with several bags of frozen peas from his garden and apologizes. His daughter Carol said that was his peas offering. Little pun there. Having heard that, I don't think I'll ever think about another bag of peas in the same way again. It'll remind me to make sure that I've asked forgiveness. I married a lady who in our 44 years together, I've never seen angry. I've never known her to carry a grudge. And I can't think of anyone else I've ever met who's like that. But I never knew Carl to carry a grudge either. And he sure wouldn't let a day go by without asking forgiveness if he knew that he'd upset you. Now's the bonus secret. Let me tell you the secret that Carl used to outlive his best friend and the love of his life by 19 years. He told me this secret himself at age 97. Let me quickly set the stage for you. I was in East Texas visiting my family. For me, family always includes a visit to see Carl. I drove up on the dirt driveway in the front yard and I walked to his side door where he always sat when he was home. And I knocked on the door. I'd done this hundreds of times before, but this time it was different. I didn't hear him moving around inside to open the door, so I knocked again. This time I pressed my ear to the door and I heard nothing. Now, Carl and I had known each other for 30 plus years at this point, and I knew he'd consider me family, and I knew he wouldn't mind me just walking into the house. So I opened the door, and, by the way, can you guess what I expected to find? His cars were there. I'd knocked twice. No one answered the door. It's a 97-year-old man living alone by himself. And as a pastor and family counselor, I've been at the deathbed of many people over the last 45 years of ministry. You can probably guess what I expected to find and dreaded to find. Anyway, I opened the door and I went into the room, and I went room to room looking for Carl, who was not to be found anywhere. Then I looked on the back porch to see if his utility cart, which he affectionately called his mule, was there. It's kind of like a golf cart on steroids. Sometimes he would use it to move things around from one part of the farm to the other. Well, the mule was gone. So I got in my four-wheel drive Subaru and I drove down to his 2-acre garden. I had to cross a stream to get there, but when I got to the garden, Carl was not in sight. So I drove back up the hill, back across the stream to the house again. Just as I entered the clearing around the house, Carl came driving his mule, and his clothes were soaked from head to toe in sweat. I hugged him anyway, and I asked him, "Where have you been, Carl?" And he replied that some neighbors down the road needed some new gravel for the driveway. So he got in his bulldozer, grabbed some gravel out of a creek bed, carried it to his neighbor's house, and spread fresh gravel on their driveway. Years of, mental conditioning on my part had led me to believe that a 97-year-old man shouldn't be doing such strenuous work. So when we got inside the house, I said, "Carl, I don't think you should be doing that kind of work at your age." Then he said the words that I'll never forget. The words that every person needs to hear now and should become all the more relevant as we age. What he said explained to me why he outlived the love of his wife by 19 years. When statistics say he should have died 18 years sooner, within a year after her. He said, if I didn't go out and help someone every day, I would just sit here in my chair and feel sorry for myself. See, he took care of a younger invalid across the street. He went to community water board meetings. He fixed things at his church. He spread gravel on a neighbor's driveway because blessing somebody else prevented him from sitting around with nothing to do and feeling sorry for himself, just stewing in his depression. My doctor told me once that movement is life. Let me expand on that. Movement and purpose are living to bless others. I hope this inspires you as it does me each day. But if you're depressed, listen to what I learned from my sister when I was on the brink of self-destruction and thinking of ending it all. Click right here.